Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this pre-concert interview, very pre-concert interview. I'm here. My name is Derek Neal from the Department of History at Nipissing, here at Nipissing University, and I also write concert music. And I'm here with Pat Morehead, the composer of Gateway of the North, a new work that is being premiered on October 18th in a concert at the North Bay Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Josh Wood, who joins us today also. And so we're here to just get a sense of what this new piece is, what it's like, where it came from, and how the orchestra is dealing with it so that people can come and hear for themselves on the 18th. Pat has received her formal training as a composer in the US, has lived in Canada for a long time, so she's a Canadian composer. She qualifies as a Canadian composer. And this work, Gateway of the North, she's written in honor of North Bay's 100th anniversary of city status. So I'd like to begin then Pat, by asking you to just tell us whatever you'd like us to know off the bat about your work.
Well, I remember Josh asked me after a concert, he said, if you write for English horn, you're going to have to play it. And so I thought I'd start with Lake Nipissing, with the mist rising off of Lake Nipissing. That's where I started. I thought that, in a way, is thanks to Linda Langdon, who's a French horn player in the orchestra. And I stayed with her several times when I came up here to play. And I used to love to get up in the morning and watch the mist rise off Lake Nipissing. I just found that fascinating. So that's where I started.
Okay. And Pat was kind enough to share her score, or at least maybe a not quite final version, but close enough to final version of her score with me. And so I can see that this piece, I mean, I don't know how much you want people to know in advance, or how much you want the element of surprise in the concert, but I can see that there's sections. There's a number of sections through the piece that seem to reflect different parts of the history and the sort of character of North Bay.
Well, the first thing I did was join the North Bay Library and went and researched what books they had. And so I had it out they made me bring it back. We had to make a special trip because I renewed it 3 times. At that point, my husband just bought me the book. But that only went up until 1960. Well, maybe because I read about Queen Elizabeth coming here. And Linda Langdon's friend actually did the luncheon service for Queen Elizabeth up here. So that was quite interesting, but I didn't really know how to put royalty into the piece. So it's just an interesting fact that of all people, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip came to North Bay.
They did? Yeah.
In the 70s, I believe. So for me as a Canadian, the only time I saw Queen Elizabeth was in Quebec City, would you believe? And all the Quebecers were out there waving their flag, with the interesting situation between Ontario and Quebec. It was amazing that I saw Queen Elizabeth. She was just like over there in a car. And it was so exciting to see her. Anyhow, so I had to decide, North Bay has got such a rich history. So then I decided, well, what's really important up here? Logging. I mean, that was true where I live too. Logging is really important. And apparently the first loggers here were Finnish. They came from Finland, which I found, I don't know any Finnish folk songs, but that's okay. So the log rolling is a bit of a waltz. And then what do we do next? Well, where did the logs go next? They went by train. All of a sudden you didn't have to take them by water. And so then I have a train coming in and going away. And I had to ask the brass players, how do I make a train sound? And they showed me. So there is a train sound in the piece.
Yes, I noticed that in that train section, there's a sort of chugga rhythm that's happening in the instruments, and then you have an actual train whistle in your percussion part, right?
But it's not to be able to hear it in the whole Capitol Theater. Josh warned me that that wouldn't be loud enough.
That's always the problem with a train whistle is, and it's actually used reasonably frequently in, sort of more modern pieces. In the percussion section, and, it's never loud enough.
Well, when I saw in Pat's score that she had the trumpet players, I think they are,
Brass players are doing it.
blowing through their mouthpieces
Yeah.
to imitate. I thought that must be the reason.
Yeah, so to try and sort of beef up the sound, if you plug the one end of your mouthpiece and blow over the top of it, the top of the other end, it makes a very shrill sort of whistling noise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the brass section's having fun trying to figure out, then you can do whatever you want, whatever, you know, because the train whistle has a lot of, overtones to it.
Oh, yeah. And like some of them, it's a chord. Some of it's like a major chord or a minor chord or something like that.
Well,
Sometimes seems to be.
My train is theoretical, because away from, I mean, one of the things that fascinated me about North Bay coming up here was the trains are they're not important as they used to be. It's all trucks, everything travels by truck. And I would love it when they bring the train back. You know, I love trains, I grew up with trains,
Mhm.
in any case.
So Pat, it's maybe easier for us to see how you would depict a train, like railroad stuff in a piece. But you also have a section here that's to do with the airbase.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you can tell us about how that worked.
Well, when I grew up, when I was a student, I think I stayed in a home where we had an atomic bomb shelter in the basement. So I was fascinated by the fact that North Bay, the NORAD, went a mile underground to create this place to be safe from nuclear warfare. It's and so I was fascinated, partly because of my student experience, and partly because a mile underground. How do you dig a mile underground? And so I tried to portray that, and that got really long, and Josh should know that I cut it in half because the piece was getting too long. So having so much digging.
So the part that's called the Big Dig, is that the part that would like go in terms of the bunker, like digging
building this facility, which I think is 2 or 3 stories, 2 or 3 stories in height, under a mile underground, and it has 2 entrances, and unfortunately, they figured out that if there was nuclear warfare, that you know, it still wasn't safe. And one of the things I told them at the orchestra last night, one thing they discovered, the people who worked underground were called mushrooms.
Mushroom work.
I get that name.
Mushroom workers.
Yeah.
That's not in the piece, but I didn't know how to portray a mushroom in music. I'll think about it another time. Anyhow, so we have the big day. And since we're on the Air Force Base, I just kind of featured the brass section being the Air Force Base. Because there are always bands associated with military bases, so that's a little discrete section for the brass.
Okay.
And then just to have fun, because I could write a piece that goes on for an hour, but I'm not Wagner. But then I go into, let's have fun, let's dance. And I had several dances lined up, and once again, I thought I was restricted to a certain amount of time, because I didn't want it to take 15 minutes. I don't think Josh would be happy about it. But in any case, so we dance, and then I say goodnight at the end.
Right. And so a lot of the way this piece works is it's almost like you're painting a picture, right? The music is evoking specific things for us. And you've got clues in the music for us to connect to those things that are being evoked. And so for like the log rolling, there's this melody that comes in, and for dance, there's obviously a dance rhythm and so on. And for me, when I looked at the score, I thought that the beginning and the end were the most mysterious parts, like the morning, like opening up, and then the good night at the end. Those are the 2 parts that are sort of seem a little bit more not quite as direct, right, in what they're evoking. Would you agree?
I wanted to, well, if I had my druthers, I'd have about 50 minutes of wild dancing of all sorts of cultures. But I restricted myself to, anyhow, just 2 dance forms. Well, I have the waltz and then the 2 dance form. And then it's time to go to bed. After you've celebrated, you gotta go to bed. So I agonized over the ending more than you can imagine. And Philip, my husband is a wonderful musician. He said, well, you haven't got it yet. So I go back to the drawing board.
Must be helpful to have another, I don't know, must be helpful to have another highly experienced and qualified musician in the house who can be your in-house critic.
Well, when I get really upset, I cry and then he comes and helps me. But what's funny is my husband took up the bassoon. He played it when we were first married, then, but he hadn't played for several years, so I got him playing again. And he said, you gotta make my part really easy. So then at a certain point, I forgot about him altogether, so I'm gonna put in a little bit more of a second bassoon that you will see shortly.
You brought up something there, Pat. Something I didn't mention at the beginning is that you play the oboe, and you've played the oboe with the North Bay Symphony for quite a while. So, number one, will you be playing the oboe in the performance of your own piece?
Probably not.
Okay. I didn't know how that worked. Like,
well, we've got 2 wonderful oboes, so they don't need me.
Okay. And also, as an oboist, like I mean, unless I missed it, I didn't see places where like the oboe was particularly, the star of the score.
There's a few solos in there, but
okay.
It was dealing with got so many wonderful brass players. And I wanted to be challenging, but not impossible for the orchestra to play.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't generally write with key signatures. So with the training I've had, well, no, I'm a student of Ralph Shapey, Shulamit Rod, and John Eaton. And John Eaton was a quarter tone composer, so I didn't go that way. But
Josh looks kind of happy that maybe you didn't go in that direction.
I just like all these veiled references to, boy, what this could have been.
Well, Josh, maybe let's hear from you. Pat says, like how this piece came to be, like how this the idea for having the piece to mark this anniversary, and then also something about what it's been like to work on. Like, are there particular challenges or that kind of thing?
Well, in order to really, we want to connect with our community as an orchestra. We're a community ensemble, which means that the majority of the people who perform in the orchestra are volunteers. And so they are part of the community, and we want to make sure that we're actually in touch with what's going around us in North Bay. And this was a really obvious way. Obviously, it's the centennial. And so we thought we'd commission a piece. And Pat obviously has, quite the compositional background. And so it's sort of a natural fit to ask her to do this piece. In terms of the piece itself, it's been very interesting to work on. The style of this piece, the different sections, they evoke different things. And it's very interesting the way Pat uses the notes to create a picture. A lot of times there's many different lines going on. So you might, in a piece that everyone's more familiar with from a composer like Mozart or Beethoven, you might have one line an accompaniment, or maybe 2 lines an accompaniment. Pat might have, 6 or 7 different lines going on, and the overall picture and atmosphere kind of emerges from that, especially in the big dig. It starts off and kind of, it sort of eases its way into it, and then it evolves into this really chromatic, very intense, musical moment that is quite an effective portrayal of what I would imagine, digging a mile underground would be. And that type of thing is throughout the whole piece. Each section is very clearly marked, and she uses these different colors and this sort of combination of different lines to create an overall picture, that describes each section of the piece. So it's been very interesting to work on. Music like this is always a challenge with the orchestra, because it's just, especially with amateur musicians, because a lot of times this is just simply not a language that they're familiar with. If you're playing in a university orchestra, you see more of this type of stuff. So it's been very interesting to see the players respond to it and adapt. And at first, I think they were maybe a little confused, but as we've gone on, the picture of the piece has gradually started to emerge. And I think next weekend it'll be very exciting to see everything come together.
Yeah. Are there like particular uses of instrumentation here that you would want people to kind of watch for or think about? Like Pat has mentioned the brass section. We already know that there's this train whistle bit that everybody's going to hear. Or places where you just sort of think something shines, especially.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the train bit, and Pat uses the whole orchestra sort of in quasi unison, and it's a very cool rhythmic idea that goes from eighth notes to eighth note triplets to 16th notes accelerating, that basically mimics a train accelerating. So everyone's playing this dee da dee da dee da dee da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da da, and it's very clearly portraying a train. And then it goes back to the triplets and then back to the eighth notes, so the train's speeding up and slowing down again. The brass does feature very heavily. One thing I noticed that Pat has done is she has made some veiled and some not veiled at all allusions to some pretty well-known tunes. I'll let you pick them out for yourself when you hear the piece. There is definitely a nod to the Italian community in North Bay as well, in one of the dance numbers.
I thought that was a rhythm that I was seeing there in the score.
There's a pretty famous, you'll recognize it when you hear it. There's a couple, and then Pat has given it sort of taken another tune with the log rolling, and she's given it a real sort of modern compositional treatment. So so it's very interesting.
I'm sure the people watching this interview, I mean, many of our listeners are probably, they may not have been in an orchestra, they may not have been present at an orchestra rehearsal, and especially not at a new piece. So is there something that happens as the orchestra is working, like from the point, Josh, where you say, okay, here's your scores, go practice them, and then everybody comes back, and then as you're progressing, like, and Pat is there as the composer, is there a back and forth? Like, is there a thing where you sort of say, well, Pat, this section we kind of need to do something about?
Pat has been very good. She's been very non-intrusive. Composers sometimes, God bless them, can be, a little intrusive if they're in the rehearsal, and she's just kind of stepped back, and every once in a while she'll say something, but she's sort of left it up to us, which is good. I have asked her for a couple things, like last night I asked her, are you sure you meant that? Yes, that's what I meant.
But Pat, you have not, is there any, because I've heard sometimes that well, and I guess I have had this experience too of, the musicians actually play the thing and then they tell you, this part is not working so well. Could you change it? And have you actually made changes?
I have an advantage playing the oboe. We sit in the center of the orchestra. And one of the things when I'm counting rest is, if I don't forget to come in, is I get to hear what everybody's doing. And so I have the luxury, being an oboist composer, to be able to sat in the midst, in the center of the orchestra, listening, oh, that's nice, oh, I like that combination. So that's a tremendous advantage. I think, it's my job to make the score as clear as possible. The idea is that nobody has to ask you a question. Now, Josh had, and I thought about making it a cut time at the end, but I didn't do it. But Josh said that's got to be cut time, and said you were absolutely right. So I trust Josh. Actually, I mean, when you write a piece, it's wonderful that you know you have a really good conductor, which Josh is.
Yeah.
And very encouraging. Not only that, he's very supportive. One of the things I love about Josh, that he just know him at the orchestra for 3 years, I believe. He's a real, true community musician. He's there for the community music scene, and you've just taken over the chorus, right? Which I think is wonderful.
Yes, Near North Voices, which at one time was housed here. And singing now has become a community choir.
And also I should mention Josh is a wonderful horn player, and he can sing the parts that are not there that night. And that, I've never had a conductor able to do that.
So if one of your horn players is sick, you'll just sing the part?
No, horn players have wonderful ears because of the nature of the instrument. We oboes are all nuts, we're all crazy, but
Yes, I was told once that that's because you've compressed so much air into your cranial passages in order to play that instrument, and it invariably affects your brain. Is that true, Pat?
well, I fell in love with the oboe through the standard piece called Peter and the Wolf.
Oh, yeah.
And I related to the duck. I'm the one that always jumps in the wrong pond and gets into trouble. But as a kid of 5, the same sort of ducky theme from the beginning, which is actually very grumbly and hard to play. It's sung at the end, an octave higher. And I used to say, but the duck didn't get eaten. He couldn't have possibly died. So my parents would hide the record. Because I was determined that, but you know, nowadays, the wolf coughs or the duck runs out, and you can't have children made. But you know who commissioned Peter and the Wolf? Either one of you know? Stalin.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Okay, well, some of my colleagues would probably have something to say about that, since we just passed the Center for the Study of State Violence. So I will, yeah, I did not realize that.
Well, if you start to think about the tune, you know, look, you're forbidden to go on beyond the gate. If you do, you'll get into trouble.
Okay.
Gateway of the North is not commissioned by Fallon.
No.
No.
It's commissioned by the North Bay Symphony Orchestra.
So
we have a very firm anti-Stalin, but anti-totalitarian stance.
Okay, well, I'm sure our listeners are all reassured to hear that, even if the conductor maybe sometimes, and I'm not speaking of you personally, but conductors in general, you know, maybe democracy is not necessarily the model that you use with rehearsing an orchestra, but all the same.
We refer to it as a benevolent dictatorship.
Yes.
The benevolent party.
Yes. So this concert, this Pat's piece, fits amid a concert whose general theme, Homeland, as I recall. It's all about compositions written to evoke a specific place. And I don't know if Josh would like to say a little bit more about the concert as a whole and how Pat's piece fits into it.
Yeah, so the idea for this concert came from, I mean, you know, obviously in the last year or so, there's been a tremendous amount of political turmoil. And for myself, I like to be, with my music, I like to be sort of as apolitical as possible. But I thought it was an interesting, it just provided sort of a germ of an interesting idea for music, because there's lots of composers that have written things. Especially in the 19th century, which is a very sort of nationalistic history person. You would be able to speak to this better than me, but nationalism was a huge trend in the 19th century, excuse me. And so a lot of composers deliberately wrote music in a national style. And so some of obviously the music that was most poignant and most meaningful to them was written about where they came from.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, North Bay being our home, that's how Pat's piece fits into this, is a description of, North Bay, this place where we live. The rest of the concert, we have some music from Grieg, from a set of lyric pieces that are very patriotic and descriptive of Norway. We have a piece called Canadian Voyage, which is a horn concerto written by a Canadian composer named Jeff Christmas, which is musical reflections on Atlantic Canada and then Northern Canada. And then we have works from Verdi and Smetana, who's a composer that people may not be as familiar with. But he wrote a piece called The Moldau, which is about the big river running through Czechia. I guess they call it the Vltava. Not sure how to pronounce
I'll take
that.
your word for it.
Okay. And then we finish off with the Sibelius and Finlandia, which is obviously a major piece. So for me, it was like I said, the sort of political situation was just the inspiration for, what sort of music has been written about people's homelands. Yeah, so that's where that came from. And Pat's piece obviously fit very well into that framework.
So how much, again, our audience may not realize, how much in advance do you have to kind of have these things and know what you're going to be doing, right? So for Pat, to write this, I know that the score is 30 pages or so, but I'm not sure how many minutes it is altogether. But
there's a step and a half.
Yeah. So
at one point it was almost 15. At that point I went in with the scissors.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to write this? I guess is from the moment you sort of sat down thinking, okay, what am I going to do for this?
The research took the longest. Deciding what part of the history I could put, because actually when you start digging into the history of North Bay, there's so much here. I mean, for the beginning of the Trans-Canada Highway system, there were stories about they were going to build a canal to take the logs to Ottawa, but they never found them. It never happened, but they were going to dig a trench. There's all sorts of fascinating facts that I found out in studying this, because I wanted to tell a story. And so what part of the story do I tell? One of the fascinating facts was there was a man called Grey Wolf, who was considered to be Indian. Turned out when he died, he wasn't Indian at all.
Gray Owl.
Gray Owl, yes. And so there are all sorts of fascinating, and there's of course the Neal quintuplets. And I thought that's too depressing to talk about. I mean, that's a whole other story. I mean, that's a whole other piece. It could be an opera. That would be operatic, but I'm not sure. I'm not the one that wants to write that. Because since I was born in Montreal, grew up in Manitoba, I always thought the DN quintuplets were from Quebec. And I get to North Bay and say, oh, no, I've been wrong all my life. But their story is so sad that I didn't think it. I wanted to be more celebratory. And
I mean, and I think part of the what any composer has to do is choose. You had to choose which pictures were going to become part of this overall portrait, and you can't portray everything. So I think I'm sure our people who come to the concert on the 18th will be very interested to literally hear the story that you're telling through this piece.
Right. Well, I think when I first started composing, I needed poetry to get started. I needed the imagery of poetry, so that my husband kept asking, what are you doing? I said, well, I'll tell you what I figured out. What was wonderful when my son came up, I said, let's go to North Bay and take the second Commander 2. So we took Commander 2 out. And when I thought, you wouldn't see it unless you saw it by air. There's a caldera, which is where an old volcano. You see those islands when you go out on the boat, you actually see them. And I thought, you know, that's why the boat ride was so much fun for me. Because I had heard there was a caldera somewhere, but I didn't, but there's one in Calendar Bay, and then I learned on the strip that there's another one. If you go west, there's a third one way west of North Bay as well. But in any case, you know, this is the capital of ice fishing of the world. I didn't know how to put that in either.
Yeah,
Tough. It's a challenge to ride ice fishing into
Yeah,
somebody will do it though.
I'd like to finish by saying I'm in such good hands with conductor Joshua Wood.
That's good.
Well, no, but that's very important as a composer. I've got many tales of when it doesn't go well. And I had a wonderful teacher called Walter Faber, an oboe, and he said about, do you play exactly what's on the page? Is that what it's all about? No, the page is just a guideline to what you're going to hear. It's sort of, it's a conversation between the composer and the players, and with a good, very fine conductor to make things happen. And I think that's the joy of writing music. It's very scary. I always think maybe I'm just writing junk. But you know, with the oboe, you live for those four bar phrases when you're a bit of a soloist. And that's very scary, but committing it to paper is scary in a different way. But once it's there, you don't have to go make a read for it.
That's true. That's true.
Well, I have complete confidence about Pat, that, as you say, your piece is in good hands, and as is the orchestra, up under Josh's direction. And that seemed like a great note on which to end our conversation and to welcome people to the concert on Saturday, October 18th at the Capitol Center. Buy your tickets now.